And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the epitome of the Iron Bowl whenever it's played at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And yes, it wasn't 4th and 31. It wasn't the kick six. It wasn't 1 second left before halftime. Balls of Kalen DeBoer, 4th and 2, to pull off that and a hat trick by Isaiah Horton is why this game is completely different than anything else that ever exists in the world of college football. 27-20 final score in the Iron Bowl. Alabama clinches its spot in the SEC championship game and all but certainly guarantees their spot in the college football playoffs. So let's break it all down. Welcome on into the SEC Unfiltered Postgame Show. It's Thompson. Like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we talk Alabama football. We're going to talk Auburn, its future, what they do with DJ Durkin moving forward, and countless other things. Make sure that also you hit the subscribe button because we are on the race to 30,000 subs. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the socials, link in the description, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. And as always, we are proudly brought to you by our friends over at FANDUEL. Sign up today at fanduel.com/SECU to get started with $300 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. The app is free, simple, easy to use. All you need to do is go on over to fanduel.com/SECU. Sign it up today. Go ahead and cash on in with your bet when it comes to Alabama and its chances of going to the national championship or who's going to be Auburn's next head coach. Okay, so let's start off with the fact that Alabama, in some way, some form, even with a disastrous second half, was able to deliver a performance to remember in Kalen DeBoer's first trip to Auburn. Again, it makes no sense. And honestly, you got to give a lot of credit to Auburn in this standpoint because if they were able to basically shut down Alabama for most of the second half, they did all the right things. They were able to take away the passing attack. They were able to make them trust the run game a little bit more. And in the second half, there really wasn't a lot of momentum at any point in the game. They basically made them have to win when it came to careless penalties by Auburn's side. But ultimately, you got to remember what was supposed to be the strength of Alabama. They were supposed to be a passing attack team, and what they decided to do was turn away from their usual brand and turn to the other side. Alabama last week kind of gave you a good indication on what they were planning on trying to implement in their offensive game plan underneath Ryan Grubb. They wanted to trust the rushing attack, which is why last week against Eastern Illinois, and I get it was Eastern Illinois, but still, they ran it 49 times and they rushed 8 touchdowns. They want to guarantee in every situation they could go to their ground and pound attack if need be. And for the most part, they were able to with Jam Miller, Daniel Hale. You guys saw Ty Simpson get involved a little bit. They tried to get Latsir Brooks involved. They tried to get Jeremy Bernard involved. They were able to do a really good job of being able to trust their rushing attack on certain plays to at least create opportunities on second and third down. Now, the other thing that was really important is that Alabama got off to a hot start. They were able to get the field goal early on in the first quarter. Then afterwards giving up a punt, they were able to get into the end zone before the end of the first quarter, take a 10-0 lead. They got the turnover on downs. Then you watch as Isaiah Horton finds his way into the end zone after 2 really good runs by Jam Miller. They pushed their way ahead, and now it was 17-0. Then they watched as Auburn found their way back into the game. And if anybody knows how this matchup goes, especially in Jordan-Hare, Auburn is always going to find their way to punch its way back in. And so naturally, there was a panic moment of, okay, well, here comes Auburn. Yes, we understand. It's only 17-3. It's only 17-6. But then came the second half. And Auburn, in 4 plays with less than a minute, was able to run down the field after a big-time incompletion that probably should have counted, where you go ahead and you watch Malcolm Simmons punch his way into the end zone for a 65-yard score. After that, Alabama responded. They were able to get back on the board. And then the penalties started to come on up. And then the careless interceptions started to come on up. And then Alabama was not able to really get anything really moving. They had 3 and out. And then they were able to finally go ahead and put themselves in a good position. Now, Alabama did the right thing, which was they benefited off of something that was a weakness for them last year. Can anybody tell me what it is? Penalties. Alabama last year was such a myriad penalty-ridden team that it ultimately cost them opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to be able to punch their way into the end zone. And case in point, they lost multiple games. They lost games in Oklahoma. They lost games in Vanderbilt because of penalties. Well, in this matchup, they allowed Auburn to make said penalties and create second chance opportunities. And eventually, they were able to take advantage of it. And the sheer balls and I'm okay with saying that word, the sheer balls of Kalen DeBoer to look at the score being on 4th and 2 inside the red zone, knowing a field goal at least gives you an advantage. Doesn't guarantee the win, but it gives you the lead. And all you have to do is trust your defense, which has kind of started to slip up a little bit, but it gives them an opportunity to make up for their mistakes. And knowing that their defense had been starting to kind of slip at the wrong time, looks at his offense and says, "Yeah, you know what? Screw it. We're going for it. You know what? It's my first Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare. I want to make Iron Bowl history. I want to be remembered for the reason why we are going to be talked about forever here on out in the long-term future." Great play design by Ryan Grubb. Great execution by Ty Simpson. The ability to watch as a wide open Isaiah Horton completes the hat trick and guarantees now it is a 7-point swing. Now, all you need to do is force Auburn to get that critical stop. And lo and behold, you get the 2-minute timeout. Offense starts to move. You start getting the play. You start getting the playoff. And credit to Auburn. They made sure they got their hands on the playmakers of the right opportune times. Cam Coleman is a stud. Cam Coleman's the dude that you want in this situation. Like 99.9% of the time, you would love to see 8 be making the play. But that 0.01% in a game that has no logic, no rhyme, no reason, no opportunity to be able to actually make total sense to the public eye, something goes awry. And how fitting was it that Deontay Lawson, which, by the way, if you watch the preview of this video, you saw me talk about Deontay Lawson saying he was going to come up with the big-time play. I said it was going to be a pick 6 inside the red zone. Instead, it was a punch-out to guarantee Alabama finishes the drive. They get the ball back, fumble right in midfield. It routes at the red zone to then get a 3-and-out, punt the ball, 2 seconds left. And a lot of Alabama fans probably were shaking in their boots at that point because they remember what happened the last time there was 2 seconds, or better yet, 1 second left on the clock. Forcing them to throw low, make a tackle on the play, and survive in advance. Veteran play. Alabama had its veteran core step on up tonight in so many different levels. The offensive line, outside giving up 3 sacks, did its job. The rushing attack with Jam Miller, it did its job for the most part. You can go ahead and say that Ty Simpson, despite being erratic at times, he was able to do his job for the most part. Wide receivers like Isaiah Horton, who came on in, definitely did his job. Jeremy Bernard tried to get on open as much as possible. They were able to make play after play after play and deliver opportunity after opportunity. And now Alabama gets to say they're 10-2. They finished the season 7-1 with a loss to a college football playoff-bound Oklahoma team. And now they're going to Atlanta for an opportunity to play for the SEC title and certainly guarantee their spot in the playoff. Now, a lot of people are probably wondering, what does Alabama have to do from here on out? So Alabama, I will say right now, is not guaranteed a spot in the playoff. They probably should be. Knowing what we think about the committee and knowing how this game is supposed to go against Georgia, they probably should be considered a lock to go to the playoff. That would be my case in point. But at the same time, losing to Georgia in a rematch in a game that probably ends up going down to the wire and it doesn't go down to the wire and ends up being like a 21-point swing. I feel like the committee is going to take that into consideration. So remember last season when when SMU and Clemson played in the ACC title game. And a lot of us were looking and saying, well, Alabama will probably find a way to push their way into the college football playoff conversation. Well, what happened is that you watched as the committee saw Clemson march its way back in, and they put SMU in the playoff because they lost by 3. So if Alabama were to lose by 3 in this standpoint, Alabama should be in. They'd be 10-3. They would have multiple ranked wins. They'd have a win in the regular season over a common opponent with Ole Miss. They'd have wins over Vanderbilt. They'd have wins over Missouri, and they'd have wins over multiple other teams that were ranked at the time. They went 7-1 in conference play. That's probably going to be good enough. But if they were to lose by, say, 21, that's where the argument steps on in, well, what about Miami? Because they're not playing in the ACC title game. Instead, you're going to have Duke versus Virginia. And let's just say for all crap and giggles that Duke ends up beating Virginia and they're the ACC champions. Well, Duke is not going to the playoff. Like, there is no scenario where they do. So that would mean that at that point, you got to include a team from the ACC, which would be Miami, that did win today over Pitt. And then you would have to also include 2 G5 representatives. So if Alabama loses by 21, well, then that's an easy way to say, well, okay, now we're going to throw Miami into the conversation over you. So Alabama's job is not done. They still have to be able to show one up in Atlanta next week. They still have to be competitive against Kirby Smart. They still have to do what they always do whenever they face off against the Georgia Bulldogs and win that championship. And if they do, well, very much they're right back in the conversation to be the favorites to go ahead and probably win a national title. And if they're not the favorites, they certainly would be hosting a playoff game in Alabama if they were like the 5 seed, or they'd be the number 4 seed, and then they would absolutely get the first round bye. Prepare mentally for what happens in the next stage. Now, on to Auburn. Auburn had a really good game plan. There were a lot of things that you can take away that are really positive. I thought Ashton Daniels played his ass off tonight. The ability to create second chance opportunities downfield, the pressure rate, and more specifically, the ability to win with the explosive plays, whether it be to Malcolm Simmons or whether it be to Cam Coleman or whether it be the rushing attack. I mean, they had 3 plays of over 45 yards, and 2 of them went to Malcolm Simmons. 3 catches for 143 yards. He did everything that you could ask for a wide receiver tonight. The fact that they were able to connect in that capacity, it shows that Auburn has an identity that is starting to come together. And it just felt too little too late, which is why they're going to finish the season 5-7, 1-7 in conference play. A lot of things that went wrong for them early on. Bad interception by Ashton Daniels. There's a lot of things that went against them tonight, but still, there were things that ended up being in favor of where Auburn, you saw a new look for this offense. And I'm not saying that that's an entirely good thing, and I'm not saying that that's something that you can go ahead and lay your laurels on and believe that that's a reason why Auburn should hire DJ Durkin. But I do believe there's going to be a serious conversation with John Cohen and company looking at tonight's game. Once again, 7-point loss. You're not bowl eligible. But a lot of people are looking at DJ Durkin and believing, well, there's things that he has done to change the way that we are viewing this program. And if we had him as a head coach over Hugh Freeze, potentially, let's say like before the Kentucky game, let's say we fired him before Kentucky, maybe we're sitting at 6-6. Maybe our offense at this point has turned the corner enough to where we are probably going to be bowl eligible, and he would have a win in conference play, and he'd have another win over Mercer. We're going to give him the job. And I think that there is a small group of individuals that are currently looking at DJ Durkin and saying, this guy probably deserves to be our head coach. Now, me personally, losing to both Power 4 teams and only winning against one FCS school, that does not give me a sigh of confidence to be able to believe that you should be the head coach. I think Auburn should strive for bigger. Here's the problem. Right now, Auburn is in a position of where they probably are going to be the odd man out. Lane Kiffin is probably going to LSU. Right now, there has been a report by Pete Thamel, by Ross Dellinger, Chris Lowe. There is a plane heading to Oxford from Baton Rouge. That tells you all the things of the purple smoke has risen from Death Valley, and they are going to make a hire, and Lane Kiffin is leaving. Florida is all but done hiring John Summerall. Now, that does not mean that there could be a late player in the game, but everyone believed that John Summerall was the favorite to go to Auburn. Well, right now, it feels like Ole Miss would have a lead over them, and certainly Florida has a lead over them because Florida is the one that's about to hire him. Now you got to throw Alex Golesh into the mix. And Alex Golesh very well is going to be, I think, in the conversation for the Ole Miss job. He's going to be in the conversation for the Auburn job. And he's going to be in the conversation for the Arkansas job. Hunter Yurachek believes they have their next head coach, and it's the guy who currently lives out in Fayetteville. That, to me, is where we are at. So I think that when you throw that into the conversation, Auburn basically is looking at a who's who of who is going to be available. Brent Key is not leaving Georgia Tech. I don't think that Jeff Brom is going to be leaving Louisville. I don't think you want to go with the G5 route of some Sunbelt coach, even though I do think that Charles Huff would make a lot of sense for the program. So it does feel like having a guy like DJ Durkin, who already is keeping all of these recruits in building, go out and make a smart hire for your offensive coordinator, go bring in another defensive coordinator so that way you can the program. It retains a lot of talent that you think that you need to build on next year. I think that Ashton Daniels is going to be back in 2025. I think that Deuce Knight is going to compete for the starting job over Jackson Arnold. He'll enter the transfer portal. You're going to pay a lot to get Cam Coleman, but I do think that Cam Coleman will stay at Auburn if he wants to. And there are a few other receivers they can keep in line. I also believe that there will be a few names that you probably look at when it comes to the offensive line that you want to bring in via the portal. And you're still going to be able to finish with the potential top 15 recruiting class. So DJ Durkin, even in a loss, feels like probably the smartest option to go ahead and keep as your head coach. Doesn't mean it should be that way, but it does feel like that John Cohen is leaning that way. I believe that we will have an announcement at some point tomorrow on where are we going to see the opportunity for who is going to be the next Auburn head coach. There are some names that I would throw out there, but I also think that they're not interested in the Auburn job or the Ole Miss job or the Florida job. They're looking for either the primetime destination or they're not going to go anywhere to begin with. So a lot of things that go on at this point. For Alabama, you guarantee yourself a win. You guarantee yourself a double-digit win season, and you kind of get the monkey off of the Kalen DeBoer back. Like Kalen DeBoer going into today, there were rumors and speculation that if he lost the Iron Bowl, well, he would take the job at Penn State. That ends now. Alabama is going to the SEC title game. Kalen DeBoer no longer has to have his sights focused in on what is it going to take for fans to be happy with him? What's it going to take for people to go ahead and buy into him? And by the way, I thought that was just such a cop-out joke that people want to go ahead and get Kalen DeBoer fired. The fact that this man, knowing with the Iron Bowl on the line, delivered a fantastic gotta-have moment with an Isaiah Horton touchdown speaks volume of why he is the right guy to replace Nick Saban, in my opinion. It 100% shows that. Because of people like Nick, people like Kalen DeBoer, people like Kirby Smart, when they realize that a monumentous moment is about to approach them, they don't steer away from continuity. They don't steer away from travesty. They stare optimism in the face and they say, you know what? Bring it on. Let's go ahead and connect right here. And he did so in the critical moment in a time where you knew that you had to get a score to guarantee that you were ahead. And he got 7 instead of 3, which meant that Auburn at this point had to go for the touchdown. They couldn't settle for an Alex McPherson field goal. Let's go ahead and get to your comments before we get on out of here tonight. We will be back tomorrow with multiple live streams, including one on the sass of Lane Kiffin and also one potentially on all of the other things that are going on in the world of college football and Ole Miss Hot Board, countless other things as well. How did we end up with Alabama and Georgia in the SEC championship game? Well, number one, Turkey Slammer, you saw Texas A&M lose. You saw Ole Miss not beat up on enough teams. You saw Oklahoma lose to 2 SEC teams, but they beat Alabama. So the opportunity for them to come on in was pretty much there. The committee never considers Alabama a lot to go to the playoffs. The entire reason they expanded playoffs, particularly because of the dominance of the SEC. No, Nancy, I'll tell you right now, Alabama is not locked to go to the playoff. If they were to drop by 20 to Georgia next week, and let's just say that BYU loses by 3 to Texas Tech. Let me phrase that. Let's say that BYU beats Texas Tech. Now we have a conundrum on our hands because that means that we can move Alabama out, but keep Texas Tech in. And Notre Dame in the entire conversation right now is probably the odd man out because they'd be on a 10-game win streak, and that would guarantee their spot in the college football playoffs. So Alabama far from being a lock to go to the playoff at this point. I don't think Bama has a shot in hell. Right now, if Alabama's offense looks the way they did in the second half tonight, really after the first quarter, I mean, they were outgained 148-35. Yeah, they are not going to have a shot to win that game. Like, far from it. They will be in dire hell if they actually play that matchup. Georgia's gotten so much better and Alabama has looked shaky lately. This is so much more film for Kirby to look at now. No, the way that Alabama has looked over the last couple of weeks, they are very much in a position of where I do not believe they should be favored in this matchup. I do not believe that they should be considered even a outlier to win this game. There's a lot of things that I just do not think are going to happen in favor of Alabama to guarantee their spot to win this SEC title game. Here's the outlier in all of it though. Alabama has Kirby Smart's number, and Kirby Smart has an Alabama problem. It's not a Caitlin DeBoer thing. It's not a Jalen Milroe thing. It's not a Nick Saban thing. It is straight up Kirby versus Alabama. He has beaten Alabama one time his entire career. And so going based off of that logic and what we have seen in years past, it does feel like at this moment, Alabama is going to have a fight simply because of its Alabama versus Georgia in the SEC title game. Bama loss has to eliminate them from college football playoff contention. With Fu lost 1 beating FSU since UF eliminates Texas. No, because if it was a game that wasn't promised at the start of the year, Colton, that's kind of the difference. If Alabama were to lose this game by 7 points, I still think Alabama would get on in. They would not host a playoff game. They would not have an opportunity to play in Tuscaloosa. They'd be on the road the entire time, and I do think Alabama would be in the playoff. Because of losing by 7 in a game that wasn't promised at the start of the year, what that sets is a precedent on making sure that the college football conference championships count. Because let me just put it this way, Colton. Like, if Alabama were to lose in the SEC title game, but they were to go 10-2 in the regular season, and they were guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff, why would you then say, well, because of you lost in a game that wasn't promised at the start of the year, now we're going to penalize you? Like, that's the reason why I think Alabama has to get on in. Now, if they were to lose by like 28, let's say the final score was 35-7. No, Alabama has no argument to get on in over countless other teams. They just don't, because if they would throw in a bad loss to Oklahoma, a bad loss to Florida State, and a bad loss in the SEC title game. But with the opportunity to say, well, we won against the number 2 team in the country at the time in Georgia. We had the most ranked wins in a 4-week period over SEC teams, which has never been done before in our conference. Why are we not going to just opt out of playing this game? Because of we don't want to hurt our chances of going to the playoff. That's just kind of the point of where you are at this moment. So I think that, yes, Alabama needs to win to guarantee their spot on in. But if they lose by 10 or fewer, yeah, I think that we can still make a case. Cole, how many teams do you think from the SEC gets in the playoff? 5. I think Alabama's going to get in because I think it will be a close game against Georgia, even if they were to lose. Texas A&M is not going out of the playoff. I think Oklahoma, of all the 2 lost teams, has the best resume right now. 2 lost teams. Let me make that clear. 2 lost teams. I think that Georgia is a lock to go to the playoff at this point, and I think Ole Miss is a lock to go to the playoff. With or without Lane Kiffin, they will be in the college football playoff conversation. That's just the way it has to be. I think that we will see guys like Ellis Robinson, Zayden Walker, and Chris Cole going to take off Bama this time. Ellis Robinson has been such a godsend over the last couple of weeks. Also, the way he had that big pick against Georgia Tech yesterday really shows kind of the change in direction of where we are when it comes to Georgia and their defense. Defensively, yesterday we saw the version of Georgia that we really want to see, which I think is really important because the offense did not have a good day. Now, if Alabama forced them to have a bad day, we can be right back in this conversation where Alabama feels good. Kevin saying at Ole Miss, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Joshua, as much as I would love to see it happen, it's a done deal. He is going to go coach at LSU next year. He is going to go to the rival. He is not going to be a part of the Ole Miss Rebels. But I will say, I think Ole Miss is still in a pretty good spot where you can feel confident, very, very confident that at this point, you are going to get a coach that comes on in with the right resources, with the right amount of money, with the allocations towards NIL and the transfer portal, and you will be a competitive team. I do not think for 1 second that Ole Miss is just going to teeter off into the sunset because Lane Kiffin goes to Baton Rouge. Georgia's defense is vastly improved. They are vastly improved. There's no way they will punish a team competing in the conference championship. There is. If you lose by like 30, they will punish you. Because unfortunately, it shows that you weren't competent and that somehow you got lucky over time and time. I just don't see a scenario where Alabama's going to lose by 20 or 30 or 40 or even 10 to Georgia because they always play close against Georgia. Like outside of the one national championship and Kirby's lone win over Alabama, they have made this a game and they've also won every single game. So I think that they're going to be a lock at this point. No chance Alabama with a lost SEC championship game. Is that would never happen? No, again, they would be out if it was like a 30-point swing. If Alabama lost, let's say 35-7, they would be out of the college football playoff conversation as long as like a BYU won against Texas Tech, because you're not going to penalize Texas Tech and BYU would have to get in as being the conference champion. That's just kind of the case that is. Yep, OU is a lock. OU is a lock because OU has wins on the road against Alabama, against Tennessee. They also have a win over a ranked opponent in Missouri at the time, who I think Missouri could finally sneak their way back in at the season's end. They'd have a win over Michigan that was a ranked team. So they have 4 ranked wins and 2 losses to one team that is guaranteed a college football playoff bid, and the other one in a rivalry game in a neutral site location, regardless of how you feel about it, because I think the Cotton Bowl is like perfect location in college football. So you add all that together, Oklahoma, guaranteed lock to go to the college football playoff. Chris Goodwin will believe it until I see it. I think right now when it comes to Lane Kiffin, all right, let's just talk about this, Joshua, because I know that's probably why you're here. Lane Kiffin, I believe, has already accepted the job at LSU. I believe the thing that's holding him back is the fact that he is not going to be able to coach his team that he just took to an 11-1 season to the college football playoff, to their first playoff big game. And it's a lose-lose situation when it comes to both Ole Miss and to LSU and to Lane Kiffin. Because at one hand, you got to look at this from the perspective of LSU. I mean, you have Ole Miss. Ole Miss cannot be sitting by idly and saying, we're going to hire a new head coach because if you're leaving for LSU, when we believe at this point, you are going to not be a part of our team. Like, you got to go ahead and say, we need to make a hire because John Summerall is basically going to Florida, and that was our ace in the hole. We were going to bring him on in, former coach that worked here. Now he's going to a different school. I think that that's a big-time deal. The other thing is that if you're Lane Kiffin, you deserve to coach your team in the playoff because you're the reason you're here. And whether or not you want to believe that Ole Miss has turned the corner, which I do, I think it's a premier job in college football. I believe it's a top 12 to 15 job. The reason why you're in the playoff is because of Lane Kiffin. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. Lane's ability to scout, bring in talent, develop talent, and make it well prepared enough to go on a playoff run is why you are in this 11-1 situation. So Lane should be allowed to coach his team in the playoff because if you wouldn't be here without your head coach. But at the same time, you have to be able to sell to recruits, this is the guy that's actually leading you moving forward. This is why we believe that if you are here locked on in, you're supposed to be taking the job. Like, all of those things aside, that is where we are. So it's not a great scenario, but I do believe Lane's already signed on the dotted line. He is going to be the next head coach at LSU. And for Ole Miss, they basically are in a situation of, we have no idea what direction we're going, and hopefully we are able to land the right guy to take on over. But if we're not, we got to make sure that we at least give ourselves every opportunity to go ahead and take on over. Why has Glenn Schumann disappeared from coaching openings? Okay, so Alexander, let me explain when it comes to Glenn Schumann. I think Glenn Schumann and Dan Lanning are cut from the same cloth. It has to be the right job. It has to be a perfect man-made situation, an elite position to where you can't say no to. Now, I will tell you personally, if I am Glenn Schumann, and if the reports that I am hearing are actually true, and I don't think that there's entire validity to it, but I think that there's enough to go ahead and say, if it happens, it wouldn't shock me. If Josh Heupel were to leave and take the Penn State job, I would absolutely be, if I'm Danny White, hiring Glenn Schumann. I would say, you're coming on in, you're fixing my team, I will pay you whatever you want. And I feel like that Tennessee is a pretty good job to where you look at Glenn Schumann and you say, he could probably look at that and believe he'll be the reason why Tennessee is right back in the conversation for the college football playoff next season, 2 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, and he'll have to sign off on the dotted line. But if it's not the right job, you're in a man-made situation. Like, think about this for a second. You're the defensive coordinator at Georgia, where you're splitting play calling duties for the most part with Kirby. You're developing talent year in and year out, and you're getting paid as the highest the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football. If you don't feel like that this job is man-made, ready for you to take on over and compete immediately, the way that Dan Lanning did out in Oregon, I don't think that you're going to go ahead and move. That's something that is really kind of crazy, but also important about what the disciples of Kirby Smart do, is they look at every situation. Hey, I'm at a good place right now. I'm at a great school. I'm getting paid a lot of money. I'm doing my job at a high-end level. Why would I want to go ahead and add more pressure and also more scrutiny on me having to take over a program and lead the charge? Oregon was the right job for Dan Lanning to go ahead and punch his ticket to, which is why right now he is going to go to the college football playoff again for the second year. He is going to have another 10-win season on his roster. He is going to have an opportunity to win the national title. A lot of things that go his way because of Dan Lanning picked the right job. I think Glenn Schumann is doing the exact same thing. Like, if tomorrow we get a phone call and say North Carolina wants to hire Glenn Schumann, I don't know if he would take it. If we heard that UAB was going to pay their entire income for the next 3 seasons to hire Glenn Schumann for 1 year, I don't think he would take it. But if Tennessee came calling, if maybe Ole Miss came calling, definitely if like Texas came calling, schools like that, I think that it would be a very, very smart move for him to go ahead and take. So couldn't Glenn Schumann take the Ole Miss job if Lane gets to LSU? I think he could. I'll be completely honest. Glenn Schumann would be my second phone call. My first phone call would be to John Summerall. I would do whatever I could to convince him that he needs to come here. But my next phone call would absolutely be to Glenn Schumann. I would tell him, how much do you want? And I would bring him on in, bring in his defensive prowess, Let him run the show defensively. I would try to go ahead and pry away Buster Faulkner. Hopefully he'd become my offense coordinator and would work as a dynamic duo to go ahead and win multiple SEC titles and change the culture for long-term out in Oxford. That would be my first phone call. But I don't think that Keith Carter is doing that. I think at the end of the day, he's going to look for a proven head coach. He's going to go after guys like Alex Golish. He's going to look at guys like Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. I think that he will make at least a phone call over to Alabama and see what Kane Womack is doing. I think that he'll have a conversation internally with both Pete Golding and with Charlie Weiss Jr. I think that Joe Judge will get a look. I don't agree with all those names. I actually would say Glenn Schumann would be number 2. But that's just my 2 cents in the conversation. We're going to end the live stream here. We'll be back tomorrow morning to break down whatever happens with Lane Kiffin and, of course, on Sunday Funday. But this episode of SEC Unfiltered is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Sign up today at FanDuel.com/SECU to get started with $300 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. The app is free, simple, easy to use. It just takes 2 minutes to go ahead and sign on up, whether that be with same-game parlays, player props, whatever tickles your fancy, and, of course, whatever you want when it comes to player games, whether it be the NBA, the NHL, college basketball, college football, player games, national championship odds, Heisman Trophy odds, anything that's out there. Go ahead and make your bet right now at FanDuel.com/SECU, the official betting partner of the SEC Unfiltered channel, and, of course, the NBA. Final score out in the Iron Bowl, 27-20, Alabama punches its ticket to Atlanta, keeps its college football playoff hopes very much alive for another week, and probably almost a guaranteed lock. And Auburn show a little bit of fight, almost guarantees that they're going to have a very hard conversation on what to do with the status of DJ Durkin, but definitely trending in the right direction. Deontay Lawson, told you in the preview, was going to get a big-time play. Got probably the biggest play of the season for Alabama. We'll talk to you tomorrow with Lane Kiffin news and Sunday Funday. Have a good rest of your Sunday night. Peace.